I sat in Clara Brenn's office holding the paper like it might slice me. My fingers folded and unfolded the page until the corner cut my thumb. The room smelled like lemon polish and leather. Clara's law books lined the walls. The will was dated 3 months after Grandpa Arthur's last clear day. It listed every name I expected, except Maya and Eli. Instead it named Vivian and Charles Blackwell as sole heirs. My mouth went dry. I lifted the paper and shoved it to Clara. "They erased my children," I said. Clara's eyes grew wide. Behind her, a small envelope clicked closed as if on cue. She slid it toward me and said, "There's a second codicil. It's marked immediate. Someone notarized it the same day your father signed with his wrong hand." My chest felt hollow. I opened the envelope with shaking fingers. Inside was a color photo. Grandpa Arthur stood in a nursing home corridor holding a stranger's hand. A sticky note on the photo read, "He didn't understand." The words hit me like a fist. I looked up at Clara. She looked back and squeezed my hand like we were both holding on. She cleared her throat. "There's more." I ran out of Brennan and Pike into rain that felt like blame. The drops hit my face and mingled with my tears. I drove fast home, hands tight on the wheel. Maya was asleep on the couch with a fever. Eli colored near the window, crayons broken and dull. I loaded the will onto the kitchen table and everything small about us became evidence. A school uniform tossed over a chair, a shoebox of lost baby teeth, a faded hospital bracelet with Grandpa Arthur's name. Darren stood in the doorway and his jaw clenched. He looked so strong I thought, but his eyes were flat. He whispered, "Why would they?" He froze and his phone buzzed. He read the message and his face paled. On screen was a photo of a cashier's check and a short line, "If you fold, we'll make this go away." I felt sick. The paper on our table looked suddenly dangerous. I imagined money wiping away names. My children's faces flashed in my head and I tasted iron. I slammed my palm on the table so hard the wool slid. The check photo sat there like a threat. I picked up the will again and whispered, "No." I drove straight to Silver Maple and the Blackwell house sat like a fortress. Curtains were drawn like secrets hiding from light. Vivian opened the door with a smile that did not reach her eyes. Her hair was perfect and she wore a dress that did not wrinkle when she moved. Charles stood behind her, tall like a statue, smelling like cedar and plans. I pushed the will at them. For a second Vivian's face tightened, then she spoke soft, cool words. "Arthur signed what he wanted." Charles added, "For the good of the family." My voice shook. "You didn't just sign. Someone erased my children." Vivian laughed, a thin sound. "You'd be surprised what 'for the good of the family' covers." She reached into a leather bag and handed me a paper. It was Arthur's nursing home power of attorney, dated the same day as the codicil. The paper felt dirty in my hands. I asked how this could be right. Charles said, "We did what needed to be done." I felt anger and sorrow twist together. I stepped closer, my fingers pressing the paper until the edges wrinkled. Vivian's eyes flicked away for a heartbeat. She smiled again, then said, "We'll take care of everything." Clara laid out the dates like a doctor naming injuries. She had notes on Arthur's dementia, sample signatures, and a notary nobody knew. The paper looked like a crime map. "We can fight forgery," Clara said, calm and steady, "but coercion is harder to prove than changing a line." I felt tiny, like a child lost in piles of paper. Clara pushed a printout across the desk. It showed large transfers out of Arthur's accounts. My hands trembled when I saw numbers I did not understand. One transfer had a timestamp the night the codicil was signed. The sender name read Riverbend Care, the nursing home where Arthur lived. My mind ran hot with questions. How? Why? Clara said we could trace the money and force banks to answer. She said we could subpoena medical records. She warned that the other side would fight hard and they had wealth and lawyers. I breathed slow to keep inside me from cracking. Darren sat beside me and squeezed my hand, but he looked scared. Clara said, "We start by getting Riverbend's records and the notary's file." I left the office with a list and my paper bundle felt heavier than before. There was a long night waiting. Riverbend Care sat behind hedges and a fake cheerfulness. The receptionist smiled like she had swallowed glass. When I asked for records, she said, "Those are private." I felt foolish until a nurse named Liza Cartwright slipped me a scrap of paper in the hallway. Her hands shook like mine. She said quietly, "You don't know what they told me to do." Liza revealed a day sheet that had been changed. Arthur's meds were logged at funny times. A behaviorist's note was erased and replaced by a short email. She pressed a small scrap toward me. Tucked inside was a ledger entry with Charles Blackwell's name printed beside a number. $8,500. It said, consultation. I felt my stomach drop. Liza's voice was small. They asked us to keep him calm. They said money would help. I realized how close we had been to being lied to every day. Liza feared losing her job. She begged me not to put her name in the paper. I promised I would be careful. She slid me another piece of paper and whispered, "There's a voice recording. I am afraid to give it to anyone but you." My heart beat fast. I thanked her and walked out with the papers tucked under my arm. Liza met me behind Riverbend by the delivery door. She looked scared, but she held out her phone like it was the most dangerous thing in the world. She had recorded a midnight argument outside Arthur's room. On the recording I heard Charles whispering, "If they don't sign this, we'll make it easier to move him." Another voice said, "Done. He won't even remember." My knees went weak. For a long time I just pressed my hand to my mouth. Liza told me she wanted no publicity. She only wanted to make sure Grandpa Arthur didn't suffer worse. I listened to her voice tremble when she said she had saved the file but did not know how to share it safely. I told her Clara would take care of it. Liza hesitated and then said something odd. "I'm sorry. I copied it to the cloud. I didn't want to lose it." She told me the file's metadata showed it was copied to an unknown cloud 3 days later. That news felt like salt in an open wound. Whoever took it had plans. Liza squeezed my hand. "Please keep my name safe," she whispered. I promised. A manila envelope came to our house with no return address. Inside was a photo of Maya and Eli on a swing, smiling like the world was safe. The timestamp showed the day of Grandpa Arthur's funeral planning. Behind the photo was a typed note, "Drop this. For their sake." My hands shook as I read it. I wanted to tear it up, but instead I found another page tucked in. It was a forged authorization with our signature on a guardianship waiver. My stomach twisted. Someone had made our names into a tool. I flipped the page and felt a cold flash of recognition. At the bottom, in a shaky hand I knew all too well, there was a scrawl. It looked like Darren's mother's writing. The note had the initials VB. My heart dropped. I thought of family meals and soft birthday candles and realized how thin that trust had been all along. Someone used my home life to blackmail me. I balled the paper and felt rage rise. I wanted to run to the Blackwell house and throw the papers back at them. Instead, I folded the photo and placed it back in the envelope. I would not be fooled into silence. I dug into Arthur's past like looking for pieces of a broken thing. In Grandma June's old house in Williford I found a trunk of letters and a brittle diary. The paper smelled old, but his words were clear. Arthur wrote about fearing that his money would reward cruelness. He had written a love note to me, to my children, praising grandchildren by name. My fingers traced the ink and my throat tightened. A later entry read, "Vivian will always want control." I felt sick reading it alone in that dusty room. I found a faded envelope in the diary addressed to Nora, "If anything happens." The flap was torn open. My heart beat hard. I wondered why the letter had been opened long ago. Had someone stolen a secret meant for me? I stared at the torn edge and wished for answers. Around me, dust motes drifted like tiny suns, and I imagined Arthur's hands writing those lines, steady for a moment. I carried the diary out of the trunk and held it close. The house felt full of old breaths. I knew now why the will mattered so much. It was not just paper. It was a map of trust that someone had tried to burn. Charles called through a thin smile and asked for a neutral meeting. He and Vivian wanted to talk at a river cafe under soft lights. I sat with Darren at a small table and our cups steamed between us. Vivian began with a smooth apology and then offered a quiet settlement. She promised a trust for education and family needs if I signed a non-disclosure. The amount sounded like safety. Darren's eyes went to the winnings and he hesitated. I looked at Maya's crayon drawing in my phone and felt something hard set in my chest. Money would not buy what they stole. I told them no. Vivian's smile did not change. She leaned forward and spoke about easing burdens and family peace. I asked why they would take my children's names. She said, "We thought it would keep things together." I could hear the lie in her voice. I turned on my phone to steady myself. An incoming call flashed with the only label, proof. I felt blood rush to my face. My hand trembled as I answered. The line was silent for a beat. Then a voice said low and quick, "Read the attached." I swallowed and looked down. The file name had my name in it. Clara subpoenaed the notary. The name Walter Greaves sounded official, until we found his address led to a closed mailbox. Clara's investigator, Sam Ortiz, chased the trail. He returned with news that made my stomach drop. Walter had been a temp who vanished 6 weeks ago. The person who had witnessed the signature was listed as Mrs. H. Cole. Henry Cole, Arthur's accountant, came to mind. Sam sent a photo from Henry's office. In the picture was a file labeled, "Alternate Will," sealed. A post-it read, "Open if Arthur forgets." My hands trembled. Why would an alternate will be sealed in the accountant's office? Why would someone hide it? Clara said a sealed alternate will could mean Arthur had tried to protect us. I felt hope like a small light. I asked Sam to find Henry. Clara said we should be careful. The other side had money. They could hide things. Sam stayed late and phoned when night had thickened. He said he would keep looking. I wandered the house with the sealed will idea like a secret warmth inside me. If Henry had hidden a will for me, I would find it. I would make the truth live in the light. Henry Cole agreed to meet me at night under the yellow light of a street lamp. He looked smaller in person, as if time had bent him. He breathed like he'd kept secrets too long. "They promised me money to keep Arthur calm," he whispered. He slid a bank withdrawal slip across the table. The date matched the codicil day. I felt like I had a knot in my throat. Henry's hands shook when he produced a locked envelope Arthur had once given him. The label read, "For Nora if anything happens." My pulse stuttered. Henry said he had tried to do the right thing but fear kept him quiet. He reached into his pocket and a small paper slipped out. It was a photograph of Arthur and Vivian arguing in the garden. On the back someone had written, "She has been changing him." Henry covered his face with his hands. He said Vivian had pressured him to be quiet and that he regretted it now. I felt a fierce relief and a deeper worry. With Henry's proof we might win. But if anyone knew he had turned, his safety might be at risk. We left the meeting with the envelope locked in Clara's safe. Henry walked away smaller, like a man who had finally spoken and could not take it back. I met Avery Klein at the old diner with its cracked vinyl booths. Avery was the Williford Chronicles reporter with a nose for truth. I handed over Liza's recording and the papers in a shoebox. Avery promised she would be careful. I worried about my children, but I knew the Chronicle could reach people who mattered. Avery said she would check everything before going public. That night I waited and then an email came, "You should read the front page." My hands felt cold as I opened the newspaper site. The headline was doctored but loud, "Greedy daughter plots to steal Blackwell estate." The smeared words hit me like a slap. Someone had used the Chronicle's name to smear me before the real story could breathe. Comments poured in with venom. Avery scrolled through fake social posts, a phony blog and a video claiming I forged the diary. I felt my stomach tighten. Someone wanted to ruin my name before I could tell the truth. Avery said we would fight back and that the Chronicle would help trace the smear. I looked at my kids' sleeping faces and wished there was a switch to turn off hatred. The Chronicle showed me how the smear worked. Fake posts, a cloned legal blog, and a video hammered a story that fit Vivian's playbook. They had influence and friends who bent the truth. Clara suggested a defamation suit. We had proof of the ledger, Liza's recording and Henry's envelope. Still, the fake headlines hurt in a loud way that papers could not fix easily. The comments on the doctored article were cruel. They attacked me and my family. Avery said the smear was meant to make people doubt us first, then bury the truth. That night the school called. A parent had posted the doctored headline on a class page. A teacher had asked Maya in front of others why Grandpa Arthur did not love her. I felt a hot shame in my chest. Maya stopped drawing and Eli clung to me tighter than normal. Darren wanted to answer publicly. I wanted to protect them. I sat on the floor and read Arthur's diary aloud to them in a whisper. The words made us small and human and real. Aya's letters and Arthur's nicknames softened the air for a moment. We needed something honest to hold. Maya stopped drawing. Her crayons lay quiet. Eli followed me from room to room and clung to my leg like a small anchor. The hurt under the smear pried at their safety. A call from school made the world heavy. Someone had posted the doctored headline on their class page. A parent had asked cruel questions about why Grandpa Arthur did not love Maya. My heart broke in a new way. Darren wanted to fight online. He wanted to answer and scream and make the headlines burn. I wanted to shield my children and keep their small days small. So I chose to read Arthur's diary to them, page by page in the soft kitchen light. His words about cookies, nicknames, and Tuesday afternoons held us like a blanket. Eli clapped when I read a silly rhyme Grandpa made for him. Maya smiled weakly and traced a line in the book as if spelling protection. Then Eli pointed to a margin scribble in Arthur's handwriting. It said, "Trust in Nora." An arrow pointed to another page that was torn out. I felt a cold hole open in my stomach. The missing page felt like a missing promise. I folded the diary closed and hugged them both. We whispered together and promised to keep going. Clara filed an emergency injunction to freeze the estate accounts. The court could pause money from moving while we dug into the papers. Vivian did not hide her anger. She called me ungrateful at a family luncheon and said Arthur was of sound mind. Her voice was loud enough for strangers to hear. In court, the judge set a hearing for 2 weeks. We had Liza's recording, the ledger, and Henry's locked envelope. Vivian's lawyer countered with a certified medical report claiming Arthur's codicil was voluntary. I felt my heart sink. Then I opened the court packet and found a line that felt like a blow. Stamped, "Additional codicil, fully executed June 2nd. And the signature looked like mine. I stared until the letters wavered. My signature there meant I had supposedly agreed to a guardianship waiver I had never seen. Clara called in a document examiner. The next day the examiner said forgers copy habits and pressure patterns. The signature on the court paper had odd pressure and a different ink. The thought that someone would put my name on a paper to hurt my kids made me furious and scared. Clara said we would fight the fake signature. I swallowed and tried to breathe. The document examiner worked under a lamp and with careful tools. She looked at the paper with a small magnifying glass and showed us what to look for. The pressure patterns did not match my usual hand. The ink composition was different. I felt small and grateful at once. But the real strange thing was a tiny discovery. Microscopic fibers in the ink matched a pen Vivian always kept in her purse. That felt like a clue pointing back to her. The examiner told us someone had tried to bribe her to delay the analysis. She laughed it off, but her voice was tired. I felt anger climb like a vine. Someone feared the truth enough to try to buy silence. Clara said this evidence would be strong in court and that the bribe attempt could help our side. The news felt like a small light in a dark tunnel. I left the room with a list of questions. Who had the pen, who touched the paper, and who wanted my children gone? That night I lay awake thinking of tiny fibers and pens, of forged shapes that tried to steal names. I promised myself I would not let this be the end of our story. I went back to Grandpa Arthur's trunk at Grandma June's house to look for the missing page. The attic smelled like old cloth and safe places. In the trunk I found a shoebox with a cassette tape labeled, "For Nora, if they try to take you away." I had never owned a cassette player and I felt silly holding something so old. Clara found a player at an estate sale and we played the tape in her office with the lights low. Arthur's voice filled the room. He sounded steady and gentle. He said, "Make sure Maya and Eli have a place at the table." Then a second voice murmured softly, "Not if we cut them out." The tape ended on a soft click. I cried with relief and anger at once. Arthur had left his voice like a map. The whisper on the tape sounded like confirmation that someone had plans to erase my children. Clara said the tape could be shown in court as a personal instruction. I felt his words sit heavy and warm inside me. The idea that Grandpa Arthur had thought to leave this made me both sad and brave. I promised him I would keep his words safe. The original executor Arthur named was Paul Harrow. He was an old friend and someone we trusted. Suddenly he was missing from the picture. Clara subpoenaed Paul and his attorney said Paul had been declared incompetent after a sudden illness the week the codicil appeared. Paul's neighbor told me someone had taken him to a clinic out of town. I felt like the net was closing. Sam Ortiz sent a photo. On Paul's porch someone had left a pair of monogrammed gloves. Vivian's initials stitched in careful thread. The gloves looked like a message. Clara said people sometimes remove executors to control an estate. If Paul could not act, the Blackwells could steer the ship. I felt my hands shake. I wanted to find Paul and ask him why he could not be trusted then and now. Clara filed papers asking for his medical records and for proof of the clinic. The court asked for more time. Each morning I woke with a heavy knot. Someone had tried to silence the man Arthur trusted. If we could find Paul and learn what he knew, it might open a door. I kept hoping the door would not be nailed shut. At 2 a.m. Henry Cole called from a payphone in a grocery parking lot. His voice was raw and small. He said he had faxed a confession to a lawyer 3 years ago. The confession named Vivian as the one who insisted Arthur sign a restrictive codicil. Henry said he had been scared and had hidden the paper. He promised to come forward now to testify, but his voice dropped and he said, "Someone's at my house." Then the line clicked dead. My heart lurched. 5 minutes later Sam called and said Henry's house had been broken into. Papers were scattered and the confession was gone. Sam's tone had the edge that comes when someone knows danger is close. I felt hollow. Henry had tried to do the right thing and someone had reached him. Avery called and said she would try to find a backup of Henry's fax. Clara said we could look for the lawyer who received it. I kept thinking of Henry in the parking lot, voice small, and I felt a fierce need to protect people who finally wanted to do the right thing. I went to Riverbend one more time. Arthur looked smaller and slower. His eyes flitted like fish. I sat beside him and took his hand and whispered Maya and Eli's names. For a small bright moment his face cleared. He smiled and said, "Nora, my Nora." The word felt like a blanket. A nurse named Marta, who had cared for him for 6 years, slipped me a folded copy of Arthur's appointment book. On a page in Arthur's messy handwriting, someone had written Nora, trust. A scribble warned, "Do not sign if pressured." Marta's hands were kind and worn. She told me she had tried to protect Arthur's wishes. When I left Riverbend, Clara called. She sounded strained. Paul Harrow had been found in a motel with a cigarette still burning and a note. They silenced me. The words hit like ice. I felt sick and furious. We were close to the court hearing that would decide a lot. The world felt dangerous and small. I held the appointment book like a talisman and whispered to Arthur's empty room that I would not let them win. Sam Ortiz dug into the cloud account that copied Liza's recording and found a trail. The login came from a corporate email linked to Blackwell Consulting, a shell company. Sam followed transactions to a PR firm that specialized in cleaning reputations. The web got wider. Sam also found a hidden camera angle from Riverbend's storage feed. It showed Charles carrying a briefcase into Arthur's room the night the codicil was signed. The footage was fuzzy. Somehow the important parts were corrupted. But Sam did find one frame that survived. It showed a ring on Charles's finger. I could make out a carved family crest I did not recognize. Sam pushed deeper and traced the crest back to an old family branch. The day felt heavy with a strange small victory. We might have proof someone was physically there the night of the signing. But the corruption made the footage weaker. We needed more. Sam said hackers could sometimes restore frames. He kept working. I kept thinking of that ring and how symbols could mean old fights and old promises. If we could find whose crest it was, we could find a connection someone had tried to hide. The crest belonged to a branch of the family called Cassidy. I tracked down Mrs. Cassidy, an old woman who remembered old feuds and brittle family dinners. She told me how her family had been pushed aside and how some things were kept secret under varnish. She handed me a yellowed estate map showing a private footpath to Arthur's greenhouse. She said Arthur liked to meet friends there to sign small private things. Mrs. Cassidy also told me she had given Arthur a sealed envelope for me years ago. She feared Vivian would intercept it, so she hid the key in her rosary. I felt tears sting my eyes. How many small safeties had Arthur built for us? Mrs. Cassidy opened her hand and gave me a rusted key wrapped in old cloth. She warned me to be careful. Some people keep knives under their smiles, she said. I left with the key as if it were a light. I thought of the greenhouse and the private footpath. Maybe Arthur had left protection inside the greenhouse. My heart beat fast. I wanted to run to find it, but I knew we had a hearing coming. I tucked the key into my pocket and felt like I carried something both fragile and strong. The night before the hearing, someone smashed our mailbox. They planted a USB drive in the wreckage like a message in a broken bottle. I expected threats. I expected more hate. But when I plugged the drive into a safe computer, the files were footage from a Blackwell gala. In the videos, Vivian argued with a quiet man Arthur had trusted. She handed him an envelope. Later, the man deposited a large sum into Riverbend's account. My heart hammered. The clips felt like puzzle pieces clicking together. The last file wasn't from the gala. It was filmed from inside Arthur's study on the night he supposedly signed the codicil. I watched a shadow move, a hand shake slightly, and the brief flash of a ring that looked like the Cassidy crest. My breath came fast. Whoever left the drive wanted us to see. Did they help us or try to scare us further? The footage felt like proof and a dare at once. I put the drive into Clara's hands and felt a tremor of hope. She looked at the clips with a face that mixed relief and fear. "This will change things in court," she said. The hearing felt like stepping under a glass lamp. The courtroom smelled of paper and polished wood. Clara led with the diary, Henry's torn confession that had been found, Liza's recording, the cassette with Grandpa Arthur's voice, and the gala footage. I sat and watched Vivian hold her face steady while Sam played the frame with the family crest. The studio-enhanced audio played the whispered line, "Not if we cut them out." I felt the room tilt when the judge overruled Vivian's attorney and let the evidence play. For the first time, the web of money, threats, and false papers looked like a plan with hands. The gallery murmured and people leaned forward. Just as the judge began to rule, a bailiff handed him a sealed letter. It was addressed to Arthur's estate executor and stamped with a notary I had never seen. The courtroom quieted like breath held. The clerk opened the envelope and read the page aloud. It was Grandpa Arthur's final handwritten line, "I name Nora trustee for Maya and Eli." My body felt warm and cold at the same time. The judge looked at me and then at the group across the room. I could feel the world shift. The judge issued the injunction we needed. The trust for Maya and Eli was restored. For now I was guardian of their funds until full probate. Vivian and Charles were ordered to repay suspicious transfers and put their moves under oversight. I could have asked to ruin them to make a public suffering. I chose a different way. I set strict conditions, required counseling, and directed part of the estate to a children's fund in Arthur's name. I wanted a revenge that rebuilt more than it broke. At home, Maya's hand found a brush again and Eli taught me a clumsy new dance in the kitchen. We folded Arthur's last letter into his trunk. My phone buzzed. Vivian's attorney had filed for appeal. I looked at Clara's coffee cup and smiled. I had one last card left from Henry's envelope, a recorder he thought destroyed. I pressed play and a voice I knew said, "I never meant it to end this way." Tears came then. I stood in the kitchen with the kids and felt a slow, steady strength. My fingers closed around the recording and I knew the fight would go on. But for now, the names Maya and Eli were back on the page.